So thank you all for joining today. For those of us who haven't met, I'm Anissa Heise, the head of the Basel Communicators Network. Today, we are in for a fascinating discussion about impact branding, using the power of our brands for social good and taking a stand on social issues for the good of our brands. Sarah Martin and Gesa Bury, brand strategists and BCN members, will show us how to authentically take a stand with our brands without diluting our corporate messaging. Sarah and Gesa each have their own successful brand strategy consultancies and have joined competencies in their joint venture, Global Brand Impact. Before we get started, please feel free to ask questions as we go. If someone is speaking, when you have a question, just enter it into the chat and we'll get to it. So, Sarah and Gesa, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Anissa. Hi, really nice to meet you all. So probably to give you a little background about us. So I'm Sarah. My background is sociology, so that's what I've done years ago. But I've been working in branding for the last more than 10 years. But this sociological aspect to it, like all the social change and how it influenced brands and how we communicate as brands, has always influenced me and interested me. And it's nice to see how branding changed within the recent years, because I think these topics get more and more important. Yeah, and Gesa.
And I'm Gesa. My whole career has been in branding, most time in the healthcare business. So I'm very familiar with the large corporations and the processes in there. I'm currently on an EMBA program on marketing management. I'm also an Inner Swiss special coach for branding and positioning. And yeah, I'm very excited about the new collaboration with Sarah, where we want to focus more on the social impact of what a brand can achieve. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think let's get into it. What we're going to do today, so we plan to give you an introduction to the topic. The topic is huge, so I think we can't cover everything, but it should be a nice introduction and a starting point to discuss and to just dive into it. So we have three parts in our presentation. The first is focusing on the why. So why are we, or why do we think that it is important for brands to take a chance, and what are the challenges that brands are facing today? And then the second part is on the who is affected, who is coming into play, and how do these actors play together and come together? And then the third part is really on the how. So we will give you some kind of top level advices, but also very personal and very specific communication advices, what you can change and what you can probably keep in mind in future when you do your work.
Okay, so the times to play low, to stay in the background, or to hide, these times are over. So in today's world, brands who want to be recognized, they need to take a stand. They need to have a voice and they need to show an opinion. And brands in today's world, Sarah, I think you can switch. Yeah. They should not only sit within the marketing or communication department, they should sit on the highest level of the organization. They should be hosted by the CEOs, by the leadership team, and find its way from there into each organizational entity, to each individual employee, and from there into the world and the external audience. Yes, sustainability today seems to be everywhere, but there is more to the term sustainability that brands and large corporations start doing today. So Novartis, for example, they initiated the Operation Planetary Health project. They are planning to become carbon neutral by 2025. And also the WEF is having many topics of its agenda, topics that talk about the health of this planet, saving this planet, bringing equality, justice into our society. So sustainability is no longer a topic that is discussed somewhere in left focused communities. They are not discussed in a niche of our society, but they really got onto the agenda of the leaders in this world. The UN sustainability goals, they have become a new standard for the execution of businesses. And in the European nation, businesses need to deliver regular reports on their on delivering on sustainability. So why is that? What is the reason that it got onto the agenda of the top leaders? It is because the world is in real trouble.
Yeah, I know this sounds kind of dramatic, but I think we can't deny that we live in challenging times. And it's the era of something that we really can call a threat of economical and ecological collapse. There is political dualism, there is technological disruption, all these keywords and terms, but let's look at them a little bit more in detail. So what are we talking about? Sorry, I just, okay, here we are. No! Finally, technology is taking over. Okay, this is the slide we want to talk about, climate crisis as a start.
The climate crisis, the world seems to be on fire, and its lung is systematically destroyed by governments, by companies seeking to make profit.
Yeah.
And
so
yeah, there's more to it.
Yeah, and I think we all realize if we want to keep up our high standard of living and our standard of security and prosperity, then we, not only for us, that's the thing, but also for future generations, for our kids, for our children. So we need to change the way how we treat nature and environment. Then there is divisive politics. So it seems that in a lot of regions of the world, it's not about finding political consensus, it's not about finding broader agreement within society, but in some countries it seems like the only question is who wins and who is going to have the power over the other half of the population. Then there is global pandemic. We're still in the middle of it. I think we still can't see the end of it. We don't really know how long it will take, and we don't really know what the long-term changes are going to be. Then the pandemic is still deepening inequalities worldwide.
And also the process for George Floyd, for example, is still on the go, or it is currently on the go, and racism hasn't stopped. It still exists and goes on.
And then the last bit, technological disruption, that might be or coming a little bit as a surprise here. What do we mean by that? So technology is fundamentally changing our social structure, especially the one of our workforces. So what are we going to do with all the workers who are going to be replaced at some point by AI, by technology? What will our societies and personal work lives look like in future? And how do we deal with new questions about cybersecurity and digital ethics? I think that's a whole topic that is just opening up to us. So this is a broad overview of some of the challenges that we are facing. And now we're going to look into who is affected and how do brands come into their role and how do they play into this whole situation. So to answer the question, who is affected? It's all of us. So I think we can't deny it. Individuals are suffering on a very personal level. And there are mental health issues rising, especially now during the pandemic, the young people, but also, you know, people who are singles, alone. We heard about it. Then you might have heard about the term solastalgia, very interesting. It is a psychological term describing the distress caused by environmental change. Then there are income gaps, which are still widening on a local level, but also on a global level. There is unemployment, and the fear of unemployment is within every one of us. So we're all kind of scared of being unemployed or not having enough income. Then there is meritocratic pressure, a very scientific term, but it is actually the term to describe the pressure to perform, which is, I think, still on a very unconscious level in some bits within our society, especially here where we have access to education. So we all have access to education, we're well educated, but at the same time, this leaves that kind of impression that if I don't succeed out there, if I don't succeed in my life, it's my fault. So I have been lazy or something. So this describes this, yeah, it is pressure that's on us. And when we're honest, when we're really realistic about it, we can't all be CEOs because there are just not enough positions for that. And then the last one, technological distress. I think Zoom fatigueness is just the tip of the iceberg to describe this phenomenon. So what is causing this? The suffering on a very personal level leads to worldwide protests, riots, and demonstrations. They are proofs of this distress and the suffering. So what are people protesting against? In the end, it's a protest against the system on a very broad scale. And what I think what is interesting is to understand that brands are part of that system. So if you look at the table to the right, I know it's small, but it's more about so that you can see the colors and how they're split up. So the table on the right shows the 100 richest entities in the world and their yearly revenue in US billions. So the black names are countries, governments, like, and there is the United States on top, followed by China, Japan, Germany, France, United Kingdom, then Italy, Brazil, and then Canada. But then number 10 is Walmart. So it's a corporation and all the red names are corporations. So if you think about that, 71 of the 100 richest entities are brands. And I think that's crazy. But it shows brands are really powerful. And I think they can't take them out and say like, yeah, well, we just do what governments tell us to do. No, brands are so powerful and people trust brands. And that's another, you might have heard of the Edelman Trust Barometer, which comes out every year. So they really do this study about how people trust brands and governments. And now within the last year, it showed that the trust within governments was lowered a little bit, but within brands, it even raised during the pandemic. That's interesting. So power and trust, with power and trust comes responsibility. And that's another thing that changed within the recent years. So before it was, we kind of had the impression that responsibility for sustainable consumerism was with the customer. So, and our own individual personal buying choices. So focus now is more and more shifting to producers. So there is producer responsibility come in place. And the Konzernverantwortungsinitiative here in Switzerland is just one example. It didn't come through, but it was super close. And I don't know, there is change coming as well. So expectations of brands have obviously shifted. And an incredible 68% of consumers expect that brands get involved in global issues. Another result from the Edelman Trust study. And these customers, they would walk away if they're disappointed by brand actions. And I think that's interesting. Another really interesting graphic from the same study. So it seems that ethical drivers like integrity, purpose, or dependability are 3 times more important to build a company's trust than competence or than their actual service and products. What does it tell? What does this tell us? So it's not about the what you do, or not only. I think we can't leave out the competence, but it's not only about what you do, it's also about how you do it. And that's very important nowadays.
Okay, so what can you do, should you do? Don't wait until your only option is reaction, but better take action now and for real. Where should you start when you take action? We believe that you should start with your values, because values, they are the guiding principle for a brand. We believe that a stronger focus on values is needed to make a difference. And acting in line with these values is required. So I think that the majority of companies has defined values as they created a brand strategy. But very often these values, they get stuck somewhere in a guidebook. But employees do not really understand what each of these values would mean for their daily work, for their daily life within the company. So when you define values, it's very important that you operationalize these values, that you identify specifically what each value means for you. Sustainability, for example, may have one meaning for company A. They may refer to sustainability as optimizing their waste management, aiming to reduce waste. But for another company, sustainability may mean to create a work environment that helps people to stay healthier, to develop less of mental fatigue issues. I think we can switch to the next slide. A company, a traditional company, may need to revise values from time to time. I remember the Dupler brand being in the media last year, whilst the Black Lives Matters discussions were very dominant. So why didn't they take a stand and revise their traditional values to adjust to what society is calling for? Why didn't they take a stand and by standing in for minorities in this world, by changing their product name? Or there's another example which came across to me just recently. It's about Lafarge-Holcim. They had to change their name because Lafarge, the affiliate company of Holcim, was involved in financing terror organizations. So why did Holcim not define values, act on values take better governance across these values, having to act once that something became obvious is harmful for the people involved, but it's harmful for the reputation of the company as well.
Yeah, I think the main point here for us, right, is to realize that as a brand, you can, I mean, Dobler took a stand, but on a very unethical basis, probably. So what you have to keep in mind is either you take action in a positive way, or you can stick to old values, but then you don't need to, or you can't be surprised at backlash and reaction from society.
Mm. And it's very important to understand that brand purpose by itself isn't enough. The purpose is a unifying reason for being. It can inspire your search for making a positive impact, but it's not necessarily involving all the ethical aspects that your values could involve.
Yeah, so all very theoretical now, maybe on a level, let's look at some concrete examples of, and good examples. So the Carlsberg Snap Pack is, you might have heard of that. It's a pretty cool innovation of Carlsberg. So they innovated a new way of gluing together their six-packs. So the cans are glued together instead of using a huge amount of plastic. And not only invented they this new technique for themselves, but also they said, we're going to open up this innovation to our competitors in the industry, because we really want to make an impact and to reduce the plastic waste of our whole industry. So I think that's a nice example. Then another one is Nike, which probably isn't one brand, or it is a brand that had to deal with scandals in the past as well. So we know that Nike, or Nike in this case, is a good example of a brand who's really trying to, with every scandal afterwards, they're doing work and they're trying to keep their reputation and build it again. So one of their latest innovations and actions is their platform for circularity, where they provide a guide with guidelines for the fashion and textile industry to produce more sustainable and fair in future. So these are two examples of quite big companies, and you might ask yourself, well, probably you're a smaller company, so what can we do? We don't have millions and billions to spend on marketing and cool initiatives. But that's what we're going to look at now in the third part. So what can you do on a very personal, but also on a not that big corporate level?
Yes, so the most important thing you can and should do is connecting with your audience. Your credibility, that's your advantage. And you should find to connect with your audience with the social topics that are moving them. So listen to your audience, but stay authentic to yourself and your values. And yeah, make sure that you are able to stand out with how you communicate from the overwhelming amount of voices that you find in social media and all the different touch points people are looking at.
Yeah, so how you can do this, we have three conclusions for brands. So one way is to really think beyond the classic way of branding. So it's not only marketing and communication, but really initiatives, actions. Then the second part is check your habits on a very personal level, but also on a process level within the company. And then the third one is just have fun, enjoy diversity, enjoy new ways of doing it, be creative. We're going to show you examples for each part.
Yeah, what do we mean by beyond classic branding? So sustainability as a term, it's a must to include it into your brand strategy, but it's no longer a differentiation factor. As mentioned before, when you include sustainability into your brand strategy, describe precisely what it means for you, how you will execute on it. Another important part of your brand is to be holistic. Look at the broader picture, look at what the world, what society needs and expects from you, but also be authentic, act in line with your core, with the values you want to define for your company. Yeah, and once that you have your brand strategy in place, be bold and creative in how to communicate around it, how to visualize it, how to execute. And here Sarah is going to show some examples later. Yeah, when you think sustainability for your business, just take a look at the UN's global sustainability goals. There are so many, there are 17 different angles you can choose from. And you will find the one or several ones that fit well with your company. So select those and shape your values around those. And there's also an interesting handbook, so the SDG Compass, that you can use to implement sustainability into your company and business strategy. So it gives guidance on understanding the SDGs, in defining priorities, in setting goals, and integrating it into your business operations, to your reporting and communication. And that's precisely what Sarah and me are very deeply involved in, and where we are happy to give you a hand and help you with. Yeah, feel free to ask for a call when you want to discuss in more detail how sustainability SDGs can find their way into your business strategy.
Exactly. That was on the strategic level. And now let's look on a more personal level and really hands-on tips on how to communicate and do brand communication. So one really important thing, and that's very personal, is check your habits. Because we're all aware of the obvious, and I think no one of us wants to be racist or sexist or whatever. I think we all really want to be open and just appreciate differences. But the difficulty is there is this unconscious bias to it. So we have unconscious structures that are really hard to overcome. And I just want to give you some examples. Think about, how do I judge others? That's really one thing. You might have heard of voice shaming, which is a term, and this describes really well how some structures are incorporate in us, in our bodies. We grew up with those. They're old. They're coming from our ancestors before, and one of them is this deep unconsciousness that we relate power and competence with a deep male voice. So a female voice apparently doesn't sound the same. There is also this relation that a man can speak longer and then is perceived as even more competent. And this relation just doesn't exist for women. So maybe I should be quiet now. So there was a study who says that women in Swiss politics get about 20% less speaking time than their male colleagues. And another study from the US, which I think is impressive, So female judges at the US Supreme Court get interrupted 3 times more often than their male colleagues. There are links at the bottom, so we have links and sources for every topic. So if you're interested, reach out. I can give you books and links and people who are interested, who have interesting things to say. One example of how these unconscious biases play into the way of how we do business and how businesses or corporations are structured is this really impressive example of US orchestras. They had the problem during years and years that their female musicians made less than 5% of their orchestras. So they didn't know why. It was like, well, maybe there are not enough women, or they can't play the same way as men do, until they changed the way of how they're doing their auditions. So instead of having the jury sitting there seeing and the judges seeing all the people playing, they implemented a curtain between the judges and the musicians. And suddenly, with that curtain being the judges impossible to see who is playing the music, the percentage of women rised up to over 30%. So I think that's quite, and again, I don't say any of these people who had to judge would have said, of course, I prefer male. No. And I have a very personal experience for that. I'm afraid of flying. So every time I sit in a plane, I have to meditate and really be conscious. So last time when I flew to London, I was in the plane, and before you start, right, the pilot is speaking to you. So we had a female pilot, and she was like, "Hi, I'm your pilot today. My name is, I don't know, Sandra, whatever." I panicked. And it was shocking to realize that my first reaction to a female pilot was like, oh my God, is she able to do that? So yes, it happens to me. And as I've said, I was really shocked, but it's impressive to realize that this is really something that we need to be aware of whenever possible. So the example of the orchestra comes from a book which is written by Iris Bonnet. She's a Swiss professor for public policy at Harvard University. And she wrote this great book, which is called What Works. And there she shares a lot of tips and research-based solutions and tools to de-biasing organizations. So there are more examples of this curtain approach, like what do we have to change in meetings, in the way how we do HR, just to overcome these biases. So I recommend that if you're interested here. Then another one is check your tech. Probably a level on a top level again, it's algorithms, but that's an example of how to show you that most tech still takes the male white man as the standard human. So here is an overview where you can see different facial recognition techniques. So you can see that the lighter male here has 100% or really high rates. The lighter female still has quite a lot or high rates as well, but then it drops down. So the darker female, yeah, well, he can keep up with the lighter female, but the darker female is really, that's, I think, a problem. So that's, again, something to keep in mind. How do we also do architecture and medical solutions? We have this problem in a lot of areas. So make the invisible visible. And we don't do techniques or facial recognition, every one of us, but what we most do, or what nearly all of us at some point do, is using images. So use alt text and make the invisible visible, especially for the ones who can't see at all. So these people are dependent on alt text in Imagery. That means if you have it on your website or use it in social media, use an alt tag which isn't the file name, but really describes what is on the image. You don't have to do interpretations, but just explain this image shows an apple and next to a piece of bread, whatever. And then Another one that most of us aren't aware of is check your web content accessibility. I think we heard of the contrast and sizes of fonts. That's one thing. But did you also know that it's not enough to differentiate visual information only by color? So for example, if you use dots and you use blue dots to explain restaurants on a map, and then you use red dots to do the shops, for people who can't see colors, this is just not useful. So try to do triangles for one category. You can still do the color differentiation, but also do a form differentiation. Triangles, squares, dots. And then think screen reader. And I know that's one I have to go through my documents as well. I'm lazy when I do Word documents or and then a PDF, I just use one hierarchy. But it is important to use the possibilities of differentiate hierarchy so that the screen readers can go through top down, like only read the headlines and then go deeper on the levels, instead of having to read everything and people who can't see are just lost in huge documents. And I think that's so easy, and it helps quite a large group of people. So yes, I think that's the thing. People ask us, why should we do that? It's work. And yes, but it's also, I don't know, it's just fun. I think it's nice to know that we do something that's helpful for others, be it on a racial, cultural, gender, whatever level. As we said, we can't cover everything here in that meeting, but I hope it opened up some aspects to you as well, and to see what you can do. A last tip, imagery, kind of a hard project for me. I love images. So images are really a fast way to connect with your audience. They're the best way to create emotions and to evoke emotions and grab the attention of your audience. So imagery is important. What do we want to say about imagery? Be relatable. So it's easy to connect there. And you can do that by being fresh, being clear, and show real emotions, real situations to really connect with your audience. So avoid the overused salesy sameness of stock imagery. And I'm pretty sure you've all seen at least one of these images. It's the classic of sustainability. Same goes for something like this, like we together heal the world. Yeah, they're kind of overdone. I don't know, what is it, 90s, 20s? Yeah, some years ago. If you want to catch up with newest trends, I recommend just go on Instagram and follow some young people. They always show us what we have to do. So I think to show sustainability, even this image is really nice. You can kind of feel that touch of the soil. You can even smell it if you look at the image longer. That's a nice one. That's another one, graphical, but it says the same. It is about sustainability. It is about nature growing, but different. Yes. So we said what you can do, and what about us, Gesa?
Maybe just one comment. What I found very interesting again is to really hear about the accessibility aspect. I remember I thought about that pretty early in my career, but as you get focused on other topics, you start to forget about it, and it's really an important aspect to consider in your brand and marketing communication. Yeah, but what about us? So our initiative of global brand impact and our personal lives are really focused on including sustainability as much as possible into our work processes, into the way how we eat, how we purchase things, but it relates very much also to a way how we build our network of partners. So we like to work in a network of experts who are all working locally, because we believe that strong partnerships with experts is a more sustainable approach to deliver constant high quality results. And the strong partnership is also a very important aspect in our work with clients, a shared understanding of values, mutual trust, transparency in the way how we operate, how we how we work with our network partners is very important for us to achieve the best results for our clients and for their brands.